Well, welcome to this work session pre-meeting video. My name's Stephen Ibendahl, project manager for the consultant planning team assisting the city. And with me is Bob Lewis from the planning team. So the purpose of this video is to kind of prepare everyone for the work session, to go through some information and also to outline some scenarios for potential growth in the city that we'll want feedback on and discussion at the work session. So with the amount of data we want to show, we thought having a pre-meeting video would be very helpful. And then also the chance then to do a pre-meeting survey, and we'll share back the results with everyone before the work session. Again, to help kind of have better dialogue and better discussion at the actual work session. It's also more instructions at the end about doing the pre-work session survey. So we'll jump right in. We have a lot to go over. Just a little bit of the overall comprehensive plan schedule. So here we are here in late winter, early spring. Kind of in section 2 of the planning process, vision and goals. So we'll talk about on this video things like a growth analysis and some of the housing analysis, and that'll help shape some of the draft plan goals as we move forward. And then we're looking to have the second community open house later in March or early April. So our agenda for this video, we'll do a quick recap of the discovery report that we issued in December. We'll talk a little bit about the analysis that we've done over the winter. And then the key part will be kind of running you through 3 different scenarios in terms of residential development, commercial development, and downtown. And again, we'll talk more at the end, but very important that you do the pre-work session survey, and we'll have in the email that will be sent out with the video deadlines for that to make sure we get those, compile those, and send those back out before the work session. So just a little bit about the discovery report, a quick recap. The discovery report outlined the existing conditions and the results of the community engagement from last fall. And there were 7 things that really kind of popped out, both from the data analysis side and also the community survey and engagement activities. And again, I won't go through these in detail, but just to remind you of these, because it'll help shape some of the discussion later in terms of the scenario. So one was the importance of Old Town, that residents really found Old Town to be an existing strength, but also understanding, realization that it also needs to be a focus in the future for the city moving forward. Growth was an important topic, and almost overwhelming consensus that as Wentzville grows, managing future growth and balancing that with opportunities and impacts. But overall, a positive response in terms of Wentzville growing, continuing to grow in the future. The importance of open space and natural areas. We heard a lot from residents about they moved to Wentzville for the natural beauty. It's on the edge of the metropolitan developed areas. You're still on the edge of many agricultural land, natural areas, woodland, and how to perhaps preserve more of that natural beauty as the city continues to grow. Housing options and affordability. We've heard some concerns about young families, recent grads, coming back and moving back to Wentzville, and options for doing so. Some different opinions on maybe favorite housing types in the city, but you see that from the data from the chart, Wentzville by far, in terms of your other neighboring communities in the county and the county overall, by far the city has the highest percentage of single-family homes compared to all your different housing unit types. Almost 85% of the housing units in Wentzville currently are single family. And then some things, kind of data pointing to, is always important in terms of thinking about future land use, future comprehensive plan, about diversifying the economy. Is always the more diversified you are, the stronger you are for the long term. And then community identity. People really appreciate some of the unique aspects of Wentzville. and making sure that those unique aspects can continue, and really strengthening kind of the identity overall. And then the last issue, a little bit beyond the scope of a comprehensive plan, or beyond the scope of what the city can take on by itself, but I think awareness from groups that we talked with, that as the city has grown, especially over the last couple of decades, the noticeable increase in terms of the need for various social services. So again, that's something the city can take on by itself per se, but I think the realization of the growth of the city, location at two major interstate crossroads, that social services is an important topic for the future. So I kind of want to walk you through a little bit of some analysis that we've done over the winter. And I'll start with just a map to kind of orient you. We'll use this scale of map and area of the map quite a bit in this video. So we'll be looking at areas within the city limits. So the areas there in a light blue is the existing city limits of the city. And then the area in the light brown, kind of bordered by the dashed darker red line, is the Wentzville planning area. So the city in the past, with past planning efforts, has always looked beyond the borders of the city, and this future kind of planning area, I think very smartly in terms of thinking about future growth, and looking at, with the future land use plan, growth in that unincorporated area, but what's called the Wentzville planning area. So the current future land use plan is shown on your screen now, and this shows it both for the city limits and the overall planning area. And the current future land use plan is a key element of a comprehensive plan. The future land use plan kind of shows the desire for future land use in the future. So it's forward looking. It's really a policy guiding a map. You think about the existing use of the land is controlled and defined by zoning, which is a regulatory document. So the future land use plan is a policy guide for the future. And you see, we'll talk more about some of the major category types, but kind of the light yellow there, one of the predominant future land use plan category types, which is that medium density residential. So one of the things we've been looking at in the analysis is areas of potential development, both in the city and in the overall planning area. So what you see, kind of as I switched maps here, kind of areas outlined in kind of the darker dash black lines are parcels that we've identified that are undeveloped currently. Could be developed in the future. We've gone through and with a logical methodology, not all parcels that are undeveloped can be developed in the future. They may have some limitations in terms of floodplain, et cetera. And then especially outside the city limits of some of the unincorporated areas, there may be some partially developed parcels, say especially ag parcels, that again could be subdivided in the future, but some may remain as for low density development. So again, there's some nuances here, but what you see is our best estimate in terms of areas that could be potential development in the future, both in the city and in the overall planning area. So to give you some numbers in terms of what that means, so on the left is a breakdown in terms of those potential development parcels in the city limits, and then on the bottom there, the breakdown in terms of the future land use plan categories in terms of what those are. So within the city, there's potentially close to 1,300 acres of medium density residential that could be developed kind of based on that future land use plan category. The next largest land use category would be commercial, followed by industrial. So close to 3,000 acres, about 2,800 acres potentially to be developed in the city limits. On the right, in the unincorporated planning area outside the city limits, almost double that, so almost 6,000 acres potential development. And there, the two largest land use categories are medium density residential and low density residential, and then industrial and commercial, the next two categories. So a little bit about population projection and what is the capacity for the city to handle that population. So going back to the discovery report, the report made some projections in terms of future growth and really kind of a scale of some different projections. But the midpoint of those future population projections was about 28,000 additional residents potentially by 2050. The current population is around 50,000. So looking at a potential population by 2050 of around 76,000. Now, based on those undeveloped areas and based on, again, the current future land use plan categories, again, for residential, primarily a medium density, and then some areas, especially outside the city limits, low density residential. The city has capacity for, within the city limits, about 12,000 additional population, and in the unincorporated areas, about 30,000 additional population. So around 42,000 capacity for additional population, which would put the city then a total population of about 90,000. So compare that to the projection by 2050 of 28,000. Right now a capacity of 42,000. There's not a right or wrong answer in terms of kind of how much slack should you have. It's good that there is some slack between that projection and then the capacity. Not everything is available for development at the same time. Different properties come on the market at different times. Willingness by the landowners to sell, et cetera. So be concerning if there was a higher projected population that you don't have the capacity for it, but the city does have the capacity for that future population based on the current future land use plan. So I want to walk you through now a few scenarios. You saw on those areas of the future land use plan and potential growth. Residential development is a huge part of that. Commercial development is also a huge part of that future land use plan categories. So kind of want to walk you through some different scenarios in terms of maybe how those areas could grow. It's important as we walk through these scenarios to think about scenarios as a way to frame analysis and research. It's not about maybe choosing either or scenario or certain scenarios being right or wrong. Elements of each scenario could overlap, could have some positive aspects. Likely as the plan moves forward, certain recommendations or policies could be included in parts of each scenario. But basically, it's a way for us as a planning team to take what we've heard from residents, from the data, from the kind of the community's values that we've heard, and throw some things out there for consideration, and really helping the city find out additional community preferences and priorities. So again, it's not necessarily thinking about these things from a yes, no answer or right or wrong answer, but thinking about what elements may be have support versus maybe other elements that may have some pause or considerations. One other diagram before we kind of dive in. Previously I showed kind of the parcel by parcel potential development areas. This map kind of simplifies that map somewhat. That the areas you kind of see there, areas in the yellow, or those areas of potential development of medium density and low density residential. Again, this kind of oversimplifies these areas. There's other areas kind of in between these areas that are potential development parcels, but it kind of shows broadly at a city scale some of these larger areas that have large extents of potential development within those. Areas in red are the some of the existing commercial categories: commercial, neighborhood commercial, and office. And then we've also highlighted downtown Wentzville that we'll talk more about toward the end of the presentation. So residential development scenarios. We want to walk you through kind of four kind of potential kind of development scenarios to get feedback on. And before we get into those, kind of again, one other kind of piece of data, I mentioned recapping the discovery report. We heard a lot from residents about the attractiveness of the natural areas in and adjacent to Wentzville that it draws a lot of people, to the city. And so we did a little bit deeper dive in terms of where are those existing natural areas, kind of based on existing stands of woodland in the city and adjacent to the city. So you see there, come on the left. The left map is the city limits. On the right is the planning area and the unincorporated areas, and the darker green are existing stands of woodland trees. So kind of these larger extents of natural woodland area. And as you see from the maps, there's some large areas, both in the city limits and especially outside of the city limits. So one of the things we wanted to explore with some of these residential scenarios, perhaps some ways, again, as new subdivisions go in, perhaps some techniques that could be used to preserve some of those natural areas moving forward. So we're going to use it as an example, kind of a 40-acre kind of potential development site. This isn't a specific location in the city, but it does kind of resemble, existing characteristics of different sites in the city. So what we would call kind of a prototypical example. It's kind of using this 40-acre field. Again, kind of a typical situation where you may have a former farm field, a pasture, with some woodland along the edges or within the middle over there, that darker green. So this is will be our precedent, kind of prototypical starting point. So the first scenario is what we're calling current trends. This is kind of the current frequent development type you've seen in the city in recent years. Single family homes on relatively small lots, fifth of an acre to third of an acre. In this case, on this 40 acre parcel, getting in 129 single family units, which equates to about 3.2 units an acre. So it gets into that medium density future land use category. You see there on the bottom some examples of that. And again, you see this a lot throughout the city. The strength of this current trend, it's a proven market type that's been proven that it's been successful from the developers. It's been consistent with the recent development patterns. But some considerations with this current trend scenario. Many of the subdivisions start to be homogeneous, that sort of look somewhat similar. We've heard that from residents, and then it also starts to get into basically, by having that homogeneous style, lack of housing types and lack of price points. I mean, you get some differentiation within some of the different housing, but fairly smaller band of price points. So we're going to kind of walk you through maybe three other different types of residential scenarios. So this first scenario is called a balanced neighborhood. So again, same 40-acre site, but this, in addition to single family homes there you see in the yellow, includes some duplexes there you kind of see in the brown, and then townhomes there kind of in the light orange. So kind of a mix of different housing types, single family, duplexes, and townhomes. You kind of see there on the bottom some photos of what those could potentially look like. Townhomes could potentially kind of mimic that front yard setback, similar to some of the single family homes. So in this case, you end up about 147 total units on a 40-acre site. So again, kind of that medium density overall gross density. By having slightly higher densities, the natural areas or the woodland is able to be preserved. You see kind of the darker green, those woodland areas are able to be preserved, and also some different a greater mix of parcel sizes. So for the single family, again some smaller sizes, but potentially then having some space available up to an acre or so for some of those areas. So again, some of the strengths of this scenario would be preserving the natural areas. You get more of a mix of housing types and some various price points, and also a mix of parcel sizes. An important consideration would be a little bit more complex in both the policy and regulatory requirements in terms of fine-tuning that mix, making sure those natural areas are preserved. So a little bit more complexity from a policy regulatory perspective. Third scenario is what is being called mixed use. So basically the same as the previous scenario, but this time adding in a small amount of neighborhood commercially there you kind of see kind of in the red. So again, kind of a mix of housing types, single family, duplex, townhomes, but having some neighborhood commercial, perhaps a coffee shop, daycare within kind of walking distance of the subdivision. Again, kind of same similar gross density in terms of overall housing units and that gross density. Similar strengths, and again, similar considerations that getting into some complexities with policy and regulatory requirements. And then the last scenario is what we're calling Wentzville estates. It kind of goes to the opposite direction. Instead of having some increased density, really going to a much lower density development. So going from fifth acre, third acre lots up to 2 to 3 acre lot sizes. And you see some pictures there on the bottom. Not really any examples within the existing city limits, but you see some of the unincorporated residential development near Wentzville. You'll see some examples of this. So the strength of this, again, preserving natural areas and probably also a chance to increase in the natural areas that folks with parcels this size tend to have kind of increased natural areas on the border of their property to kind of buffer them from their neighbors. Also, probably an opportunity perhaps to attract even higher income households. So Wentzville's already very prosperous with some of the median household incomes, but with parcels this size, an attraction of even higher incomes. But then the consideration would be a higher per capita cost of infrastructure. You have less houses supporting the infrastructure in terms of streets, water lines, et cetera. And then also the market demand, with the price point for homes at this density, match the market demand in terms of those probably fairly high price points. So this page summarizes the 4 different scenarios. Again, we kind of walked you through current trends, balanced neighborhood, mixed use neighborhood, and Wentzville estates. A couple things to highlight there in the yellow. We've highlighted a gross density. So the existing medium density future land use plan category, the gross density is 2.1 to 4 units an acre. So you see 3 of those scenarios fall within that range. The other thing to make you aware of in that line beneath, we also looked at in terms of the amount of linear feet of a public street per residential unit. And obviously this would vary based on the any actual development, but just based on these scenarios, you see in terms of balanced neighborhood mixed use, by having some slightly higher density housing types, you're more efficient with the amount of streets, and it would also apply to things like water lines, sewer lines. So much more efficient um, with infrastructure and the amount of housing units. You see there, like on Wentzville Estates, even though you would have less road, you also would have much less number of housing units, kind of supporting the maintenance of that road. So much higher. Each house would have to support a much higher amount of linear feet of road, water lines, et cetera. So at the end, we'll kind of walk you through in terms of then where to provide your comments, but we'll be asking you for this scenario and the other scenarios, your thoughts on this, and we'll kind of walk you through those at the end of this video. And we'll turn it over to Bob, who'll kind of walk you through the commercial development scenarios.
All right, thank you, Stephen. And this isn't as lengthy. That was quite a lecture in urban planning from Stephen. Here, we're going to talk about the commercial and industrial properties in Wentzville and the planning area, and kind of what we see is the demand for it, both the current and future, and kind of implications for how much land do we need to devote to this. So this graphic shows the existing development in what we're calling commercial, or what you all call commercial. We've got an example of that in a minute here, and industrial properties in the city. So right now, or in the area, right now there within the city limits there are 900 acres that are considered developed in commercial, and then another 143 in that unincorporated planning area that are considered commercial. These are as developed, and then 702 acres of existing development of the industrial property. Now, a lot of that is some of that is the GM property, of course, but a good amount. The next slide, pardon me, gives you an example of what commercial, if you can read it, what the existing commercial types are. These are commercial designations created by the county assessor for tax purposes. Now, we use them because they apply locally, but you get a sense of how many acres are taken up by a long range of commercial uses. Most land use plans, comprehensive plans, wouldn't go into this detail. Zoning ordinances might, but certainly these are the kinds of uses that, as we look at the future, how much more of this and where they could go is applicable to the future land use plan. So we have a sense of the diversity. Stephen used that word earlier, of the amount of commercial businesses that we would want to be able to accommodate as Wentzville continues to grow. And again, these are the 900 acres that are already developed. Now, we've done some analysis just on retail purchases, because that's the easiest way to do it. Commercial land uses that you saw on just the immediately previous graph can go beyond retail, strictly speaking, but the using data from the United States Consumer Expenditure Survey and analysis we've done of the number of households by income, this is the way you get spending patterns. Now, the blue are the spending patterns we would expect within Wentzville today. It's 2023 data, the latest you can get, but you get the idea here. The main thing this graph shows is there's a strong skewing toward higher income households. We're talking upper middle class here in terms of incomes, and those households spend a lot of money on what we would call retail. Frankly, they'd spend more than this in retail environments, and we're being very liberal about what we're calling retail here. But you get the idea that the bulk of the spending is coming from a very affluent Wentzville. The green bars then take those population projections and break those down into income, the same income groups, keeping the constant $23 amounts, but looking at 2050 and how much more we would add to the buying power, dining, retail kinds of services, and so forth. And again, it skews strongly to the right, to the upper incomes. So you have a pretty affluent shopping crowd here which also tells us there may be some opportunities for higher end kinds of retail. And maybe Wentzville can be a little more, picky about what kinds of development it wants in the commercial sense in more valuable parts of town. Those are topics we'll address as more scenarios go on. Next slide looks at the future. You saw that earlier graph. The red bar on the left there, again, that's at 900 acres in the city and 143 in the planning area that are considered commercial. But looking at the buying power, et cetera, of Wentzville residents, you should be only supporting around 425 acres, not 900. So a lot of what you have developed for commercial may be affected by two forces. Well, I know one of them is you're attracting a lot of shoppers, diners, and so forth from other places. In effect, as if you didn't know, you are a destination for a wider hinterland of Western St. Charles County, Lincoln, Warren counties, maybe further. Wentzville Parkway, of course, is an example of you can probably find anything you want to buy there. So a lot of the demand for that land is showing up from outside purchasers, which is a good thing. It brings new money into the community and adds to sales tax and so forth. There may also be, however, given the gap here, that longer arrow, up and down arrow on the left, there may be some businesses that aren't doing as well as they should be because while it's developed, they may be a little bit overdeveloped. We don't know that quite, but something to keep an eye on. A similar picture, although a little tighter on the industrial side. I can figure out that we only need about 550 acres of industrial land in Wentzville, but we've got 700 going on. So we've got a bit of a gap that's coming from somewhere else, which is a good thing. Brings new money, new investors into the community. But we may have a little more land for an industry than we really need at the current moment. And then back to, you've seen this slide before, looking at how much capacity there is within the city on the left and the unincorporated planning area, the fringes of most of Wentzville on the right. As Stephen went through it on the residential side, I hope you get the message that you've got ample land to absorb in these two areas. Ample land to absorb the likely population growth. It also means you've got ample land to absorb the commercial and industrial growth that's expected. Maybe too much in all those cases, so be a little careful. If you go back to the previous slide real quick, I wanted to point out the dark red on the left side. This is where we're talking about maybe some mixed use, higher value commercial stuff, throwing that into the city limits itself. You want to go on then? Now we can go on. So here's the demand we're seeing in the future. There's commercial potential development overall. We've dealt with that 1,043 acres noted earlier. And now another 1,250 acres of potential development in the future land use. However, the demand is not showing that that's going to be necessary. There are a couple of factors here. One, there may be simply too much land planned for, well, we'll talk about the industrial side as well, for those two uses. And therefore, some of that land we might want to consider for other uses, which might be healthcare related, might be different kinds of housing opportunities and so forth. But we also have to think into the future that as the population of your part of the world, the Wentzville part of the region, continues to grow. We're talking Lincoln County, Troy, we're talking Warrenton, Warren County, and Forestell and other parts of West. As those places begin to grow, they are going to attract their own particularly commercial businesses to support the rooftops, the households that are out there. Right now, you're supporting them because you've got it and they don't have enough density, broadly speaking, to support large retail developments. But we have to expect that they're going to have that. And that's going to lessen the demand in Wentzville, at least lessen the growth in demand in Wentzville. So planning a lot of land for commercial development based on uh, recent past experience might be a false indicator. So we want to think about future land use in both cases here to make sure that there's sufficient land for the market to work flexibly, giving developers and stores and businesses plenty of choices, but maybe not too many choices. And to me, this graphic and the data we've put together suggests we might be offering too many choices and then wasting opportunities for something else. Next slide, I think, gets back to.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And I'll
There
take
you
this
go. That's
and kind
Steve.
of walk through.
Thank you.
And this slide gets a little esoteric. But this slide looks at existing zoning, comparing it to the future land use plan. And the reason why this slide is important, we heard from a lot of residents about in terms of supporting growth, but also kind of realizing that perhaps um, areas that are designated for growth now should be again allow those areas to move forward with development. But then maybe other areas that don't have a aren't designated maybe think about some choices, right? So this looks at in terms of does the existing zoning and then the category of the existing future land use plan match? So within the city, almost 2/3 of the city, the zoning and the future land use plan match. Quite a bit, especially kind of in the southwestern part of the city, is zoned agriculture. And in some ways, a zoning of agriculture is almost like a blank slate in terms of the future use, right? It's not designated for residential yet. It's not designated for commercial or other things that the designations in some ways a very it's a simplified way to think about it, but it's kind of more of a blank slate. So in the city limits, quite a bit already kind of being designated for certain uses, and it aligns with the zoning. But if you look kind of again, kind of the unincorporated areas outside the city limits, but in the planning area, almost 95% of those areas that are still kind of potential development is currently zoned ag. So quite a bit of a blank slate in those outside areas. So kind of walk you through three development scenarios on the commercial side, and these are descriptive scenarios as opposed to on the residential, showing you some kind of diagrams. This is going to more just a description. So the first scenario, again, what we call current trend. So basically maintaining the existing future land use plan category. So basically right now the city has three future land use plan categories for commercial, neighborhood, commercial, and office. So his current trend would keep those three, and also keep all the current amount of land designated for commercial uses that Bob kind of went through on those graphs as commercial. So the strength of this scenario would be it's a substantial amount. It's well positioned along your transportation corridors, and we'll keep kind of that option open in terms of future development, kind of keeping Wentzville in terms of that availability as an economic driver of Western St. Charles County. But some considerations, and Bob kind of touched on this a little bit, that dependence on that regional market share might create some vulnerabilities long term in commercial demand. Typically, if you have some of that vulnerability, it can lead to weakened commercial centers, higher vacancies, sometimes pressure for lower quality development, and then you sort of get into maybe some fragmented and dispersed commercial growth patterns. Second scenario for commercial growth would be what we're calling regional destination. So under this scenario, adding one, maybe two new commercial future land use plan categories that would encourage master plan, high quality, regionally distinctive developments. These would leverage some of those larger, continuously undeveloped areas that we saw kind of on the previous maps to support coordinated, well-designed projects as opposed to piecemeal growth. So the strength of this scenario would be that the potential to attract larger employers or mixed-use centers or even entertainment destinations that would expand the tax base, job opportunities. could be an opportunity to distinguish Wentzville from nearby communities. The consideration with this scenario would be one would be patience. That thinking about kind of larger scale master plan projects don't always align with sometimes short term economic cycles. And then second consideration would be balancing the amount of land for these specialized commercial categories versus more just general commercial use. Third scenario is what we're calling reduced future commercial land. So in this scenario, basically the areas that are already zoned for commercial, keep those within the future land use plan. But some of those areas that we highlighted on the previous map that are ag, but maybe shown on the future land use plan as commercial, maybe rethinking those as alternative land use categories such as residential or mixed use. So the strengths of this approach would be it reduces the risk of oversupply of the commercial land. Often having fewer well-defined areas can lead to higher quality development, stronger tenant or office mix, and then some of that reclassification could accommodate additional residential or mixed use housing options. But then the consideration of that would be you may lose some of that future regional market share. So basically, three scenarios to think about from a commercial side. And again, we'll ask you some questions on those. Final scenario we want to walk through is downtown Wentzville. And we heard a lot from residents about the importance of not only downtown, Old Town now, but also the need to keep it as a priority for the future. And as we think about not only Wentzville's downtown, but comparing it to other downtowns, there on the left, we kind of highlighted in the pinkish red, kind of the area of downtown Wentzville. Obviously, the future hospital, coming in will be a major change. But we looked at some of the existing population and the existing jobs in downtown Wentzville, because as you think about vibrant downtowns, not only do you have visitors coming in to the downtown, but you also need a strong support of folks living there, and then also folks working there to create that support, especially for things like restaurants and kind of other perhaps kind of entertainment aspects, kind of that vibrancy of a downtown. So Wentzville, and we used a kind of comparison of a population and jobs per acre. It's a little bit over 4 persons per acre, and about 3.5 jobs per acre. And obviously, the future hospital will change that dramatically. And then we compared Wentzville to some other frequently mentioned downtowns in the St. Louis region. A lot of times, folks will compare areas to St. Charles, Main Street, as an area, and then we also looked at Webster Groves and Kirkwood as comparisons. So, especially focusing here on St. Charles, you see in terms of existing population, denser than what Wentzville has, currently in terms of about 6 people per acre, and then quite a bit denser in terms of jobs. And of course, if you're familiar with St. Charles Main Street, and not only do you have a hospital there, but you have quite a bit of city and government offices there. So a little bit different context, but you see kind of some of the comparisons. So I think one of the things we're looking at with the scenario for Wentzville is perhaps especially supplementing maybe additional increased population, in the downtown Wentzville area. So again, these are kind of two narrative kind of based scenarios. So the first one would be we're calling a hospital a catalyst. We know the hospital's coming. It'll act as a catalyst on its own. It'll attract not only jobs and visitors, but likely complementary businesses and new investments, especially probably related to medical and kind of the healthcare side. Um, so this scenario kind of looks at, the hospital would kind of be the driver of a vibrant downtown Wentzville. So the strength of this would be you're leveraging a major institutional investment. It's going to create opportunities for complementary uses. Going to have more jobs, more workers downtown. So not only kind of complementary kind of healthcare sector jobs, but also supporting kind of lodging and dining downtown. We talk about kind of daytime population. Obviously, a hospital is 24/7, but especially kind of in those kind of key daytime hours, kind of a higher percentage of a worker population. But some considerations with just this approach of having the hospital be the catalyst. There's a risk that becomes maybe overly focused on medical support and healthcare, a kind of adjacent growth. Will be too much market driven and maybe needing some guidance from the existing stakeholders and different organizations that are already downtown and been there for a long time. And then, if not integrated thoughtfully, there's a chance that may not reflect and reinforce Old Town's historic character. So the second scenario we're calling, downtown a master plan that, frequently from a citywide comprehensive plan, a city will look at areas of the community in more detail, doing more focused strategies and more focused planning. Downtown Wentzville seems ripe for that area of focus by the city. So in this scenario, having preparing and adopting a detailed downtown master plan that preserves and enhances Old Town's historic identity while being strategic about infill and redevelopment opportunities. So the strengths of this approach would be a chance to really protect and enhance Old Town's historic identity, looking very strategically at areas in terms of opportunities for infill and redevelopment, especially maybe in regards to housing, in terms of trying to increase that population number somewhat in downtown. And also kind of keeps downtown both through the plan and the process, making downtown a priority as a functional heart of the city. We saw that especially from longtime residents, but we also saw from the community engagement that newer residents to Wentzville didn't quite place a high emphasis on downtown as longer term residents did. So this may be a chance kind of to shift citywide focus on the importance of downtown. But consideration would be, it requires, again, some time and resources to implement a strategic plan effectively for a downtown. So with that, again, we'll ask you some questions. I'll go over those here in a minute. Next steps. So again, please take the pre-work session survey, and again, you'll be given some deadlines. The work session is Wednesday, March 4th, but you'll be given some instructions in terms of a deadline to take the survey, so that way we can get the survey back from the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Aldermen, and then we also want to send it back out to kind of help prime the discussion for the work session on March 4th. So again, kind of pay attention to the deadline. And then looking forward a little bit, the next comprehensive plan open house will be, we're looking at late March in terms of some dates. And again, the information you kind of saw in this presentation, the intent will be then kind of to take it out and get feedback from the public. So we'll be comparing both what we're hearing from the work session to what we're hearing from the community. And before we end the video, I'll very quickly then go over. So you'll get a link to a survey. And so again, with the survey questions are very simple. There'll be 3 kind of categories of questions. We'll have just a brief summary of the residential development scenarios, and then asking you for each scenario, kind kind of a range of very supportive, somewhat supportive, no opinion, or not supportive. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not about either or. You could have maybe strong support for all the different scenarios or aspects of those. So again, kind of choosing um, this range of support for each of the scenarios. And then also what's very important is besides that question on level of support, tell us why. So we provide a comment box. So tell us in the comments box why you chose that answer for um, uh, response. So again, we'll share those responses back out to the group. There'd be a question on residential, a question on commercial, again, kind of the same range of very supportive, somewhat supportive, no opinion, or not supportive, and then also the downtown scenarios. So again, thank you for your time for this video, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone at the work session in March.